Good evening and welcome to the May 12, 2020 Northern London School Board meeting. This meeting is being recorded. We thank you for attending our school board meeting in the virtual format. Please know that all webinar community member participants will remain on mute during the meeting unless they have put in a request to speak during the public comment period. The school board will meet for executive session immediately following this meeting to discuss personnel issues. Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Gray?
Here.
Herdman?
Here.
Fowler?
Here.
Marlowe?
Here.
Murray? Klein?
Here.
Sekelic?
Here.
Nom?
Here.
Bucks?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
I'll move.
And I believe we have a second from Stacy. Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. We have a couple of presentations for this evening. The high school students of the month for April are Natalie Casey and Shayla Weaver. And the students of the month for May are Isabella Ayayo and Ryan Marlowe. This award is sponsored jointly by the Fredericksburg and Jonestown Lions Club, and each recipient will be recognized at a future meeting of the Lions Club. The middle school student of the month for April is Nathan Klinger. For May, it is Carter Cheslock. And for June is Paxton Horner. This award is sponsored by the Northern London County Rotary Club, and each recipient will be recognized at a future meeting of the Rotary Club. We congratulate these students, and we thank the Lions Club and Rotary Club for their continued support of our Northern London students. Moving on to item E, our superintendent's report, Dr. Messinger.
Yeah, since we talked last, the big thing, it was fun this week to be able to start thinking about summer and next year, and starting to turn our attention to some of those things. One of the big changes that we are going to make is, as you know, we entered some trade days into the calendar for teachers. And the purpose of that is really to start emphasizing professional learning and giving teachers opportunities to take advantage of the many, many webinars, trainings, and their colleagues over the course of the summer to pick things that are very important to them. So this morning, actually, we rolled out our professional development plan for teachers. They are in the process of putting together a plan for each trade day that will be approved by administrators. And I have already heard really positive feedback about people being able to choose things that are pertinent to their field, to their position. And it's going to be extremely personalized, very similar. I describe it as we would want to personalize or differentiate our instruction for our kids. We're doing the same thing for our teachers. And I'm excited about it. I had a group of teachers, and Mr. Reist and I, that worked together to put this together, put the plan together we put it on Schoology, so they have all the information there and have all the choices. And we got that out today, and they're really excited about that for this summer. The other thing that I really want to bring your attention is not necessarily our district, but is about our community. And I've talked a lot about the people that are helping with our meals and the fantastic job that they've done. But I had a conversation today with one of the leaders of a youth sports program. And we have a number of those: the soccer club, the football program, Viva, the basketball club, the Little League. We have a number of sports organizations, and they have come together to donate money to JOI Pantry. And also they're doing a big food drive coming up to try to get food for the pantry as well. They're going to have 3 different locations. We're going to advertise it to our families so that they're aware of it, and people that can give will have those opportunities. But what a fantastic thing! You know, they called each other, they worked it out together, and then they called me, and we're certainly able and willing to advertise and contribute in any way we can. But I just thought that was really neat to see those youth organizations who right now would be out playing and practicing and instead can't. So I'm glad that we can help with that, and looking forward to their participation with that. And that is the end of my report. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any old business for discussion this evening? Hearing none, we will move on to the public input session. Interested persons must complete a written request to address the board by 6:25 on the day of the board meeting. We have one request for this evening, and that is Mr. Andrew Murphy. Mr. Murphy, please state your name and address prior to sharing your comments. You have 4 minutes.
Andrew Murphy, 1828 Blacksbridge Road, Anvil, PA. I'm guessing you guys have figured out by now that you guys made the wrong decision on the track and you should have done the repair this year and held off until you finished your survey. The slides last week, those were smoke and mirrors. They claim that they will lose $953,000 in revenue, and they claim they're going to cut $859,000. But they didn't show that. If you look at their slides last week, the expense of the cuts and their totals, and where we are now specifically, if you just do the math, at 0%, they're only showing cuts of $359,121. They are not showing cuts of $859,000. They are not showing that additional 10%, $500,000 that they said that they are going to make the cuts on. So that universal cuts of 10% isn't even in there. So if you do the numbers, a 0% tax is a deficit of $94,000. It is not a deficit of almost $600,000. It's a deficit of $94,000. A 2% tax increase leaves you with a surplus, a profit of $286,000. This is just the simple math. So over the last 2 years, you had someone elderly come to the board meeting following the cuts, saying, or following the budget, saying you guys just approved a budget that's more than their annual income. For the last 2 years, you had that happen, and now with more people with the COVID having job problems and loss of funds because of everything being closed, now you're asking us to pay more when you don't need it, when you're showing you don't need it, but you're showing it looking like you do. So go back to your teacher contract that you can't afford and renegotiate. There's no reason you can't renegotiate that contract. I've suggested it for a couple of years now, but you guys haven't done anything. Cut the cafeteria transfer, because the cafeteria transfer and the budgetary reserve should both be cut. Those were listed on the Where Are We Now as things that would require the end fund balance to do. Cut them. You don't have to do them this year. You're going to use the end fund balance if you need to anyway, so why spend the extra $500,000 in those two numbers? So it's just ridiculous if you do the math and what they're showing versus what it looks like. Because if you take the original numbers that they put on the pre-COVID numbers and you just subtract out what they're doing on the 0%, you'll see it plain as day. And last week, you guys were all saying, let's do a tax increase, let's do a tax increase. Let's not do a tax increase. $94,000, you guys can survive. People are hurting out there. It's not the time for that. Show us you're really cutting. I've seen school districts where their plans are to cut staff. That's not what we want. But you're showing that you're gonna do almost $900,000 worth of cuts, but then when you put out your budget numbers to request the tax increase, you're not putting all the cuts in it. Look at your numbers. You really wanna come and look at all of us and approve a 2% increase and profit over there almost $300,000, and then look at us and look at people that may be out of work temporarily and tell them, yeah, we had to do it, but your numbers are going to show that you're in a surplus. That's the red face test. Can you do that?
Mr. Murphy, that has been 4 minutes. Thank you for your comments. Moving on to item I, items on our consent calendar. We have items 1 through 19 on our consent calendar for this evening. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. Moving on to item K. We have several discussion items for this evening. The first is to open discussion on item 2 on our list of items for discussion. And that is to discuss the 2020-2021 budget. Before we actually start the discussion, I believe that Mrs. Leanne Martin and Dr. Kissinger would like to kind of give us an update on where we're at now.
Well, I just going back, a few changes to the slide that we presented last week. Some of it's identical, some of it is just changing to show numbers that I was asked to show. The 0% is where the $593,952 comes into play, which is I think what the public comment was referring to. And that was, if you recall, that was what we talked about. That's where we would be cutting 10% across the board to get. If we are at that point, that's where we were headed with that. Based on the board discussion last week, we put together numbers at a 2.5%. You can see how much we had to cut that was remaining, which was $118,459. I'll give Mrs. Martin a lot of credit. She went in and went through some things and was able to do some of that percentage cuts across the board, but didn't have to hit some of the areas as heavily as we would at the $593,000. And she was able to get that balanced. I was also asked, what number was it? What number would it be based upon the projected loss in revenue? What number would it be to basically have a balanced budget without any further cuts? I asked Mrs. Martin to put that there at 3.1217. If you went out another decimal point, I guess you could take care of the $213, but that's as close as we got to it, going out 4 decimal places. So that's the number that it would be without any additional cuts. So I don't know if there's, Mrs. Martin, did you have any other comments to add to that? I kind of stole your show, but.
No, that was fine. I just wanted to reiterate that the actual budget that we will be submitting to the state that I have prepared, like you said, at the 2.5%, we did go and get cuts, and it's balanced as a 2.5%. And then we would have to be adding in the track reserving, the budgetary reserve, and the cafeteria transfer. So it would have a deficit of $950,000, but it's balanced with 2.5% without those 3 items in it.
Right, and those 3 items at the bottom we talked about before are one-time expenses that will come out of fund balance.
Thank you for that update. So since the committee meeting, I've had a board member contact me with interest in possibly starting off the vote for the this year's budget at a percent different than what we've decided upon or kind of came to a conclusion at the end of last week's meeting. So at the end of last week's meeting, we were collectively thinking 2.5% increase in millage for the budget. But in hearing that feedback, I thought it would be best if we brought that for public discussion this evening. As we make this decision, we don't want to be randomly having a bunch of different votes. So we'd like to make sure that we are publicly voicing where we're at as far as if we agree that 2.5 is where we want to start that vote at, or if we are not in agreement at 2.5, what percent you would feel most comfortable at. So I invite that discussion from the board members before we move on to the actual vote.
This is Martin. Do we at this point have any idea what's going to happen with state funding?
No, nothing further than what we knew before, that it level funding is the prediction. We don't know more than that.
And Dr. Messenger, are you saying with the 2.5% increase, there would still be cuts that you feel would be felt by the district?
I think we went through initially and we're pretty proud of our efforts to cut the budget before, during the first presentation, that we were ready before COVID-19. Additional cuts can always be made, but anytime you cut past a certain point and you do start to impact, I'll give you an example, and I think I listed some of the things before, that we haven't been in a textbook cycle in the district for a long time, and there's reasons for that. Some of that is because we spend a lot of money on software and have supplemented what used to be textbook funds with software funds. But there are places where textbooks are appropriate, and there are students that would benefit from an actual book versus a PDF on a computer screen. We put textbooks in the budget this year. When we made those cuts, we took them out. When Leanne went in and cut additional monies, it was getting into some supplies. It was getting into some of the athletic things, and things that we have done in the past that we won't necessarily, do next year. Some of those things are, we feel a little bit like the textbooks. Some of those things, maybe not as much. Anytime you have a budget this big, there are wants and there are needs. I think we did a pretty good job of getting it down to the needs. And I think, under normal circumstances, we were in good shape. I think the problem that lies, and this is what all of you have asked me, is the problem is that the revenue is uncertain. And, we talked about it last week. I think it's one of the most difficult decisions probably that we'll make, just because of the circumstances surrounding it. So we at the 2.5, we took out the $118,000, but again, those are things that we've bought in the past that we won't replace at this point unless Pennsylvania comes back and we get back to work and things change.
Right. So
go ahead, Rob.
No, I clearly understand our desire to raise taxes as low as possible. My bigger concern is what's going to happen when the people at the state level to cover their deficits start to impact us, and what the greater impact is to our school district long term. And I know the difference between 2.5 and 3.1 sounds like a lot, but it's not that much over a year. It's about $12 to $15. So I actually reach out because my bigger concern was how it would impact some of the farmers within our community. And I know because of their property values, that they probably pay more in school taxes than what our average household does. So I reach out to one of the local farmers, and we had a very productive, wonderful conversation. And for him, with a much larger tax bill, it would still be $50 a year total to try to give us a more firm, the $50 difference from 2.5 to 3.0%. And so with that in mind and wanting to make sure if revenues go south starting next year, I think we'd be wiser to do that small increase this year to protect ourselves.
Yeah, so I concur with that with a caveat, but number one, I think we had some good discussion on this last week when we kind of came to the 2.5 as kind of a base or a minimum. And I'd add to it that some of the uncertainty on the state side right now, could cause us to move this, could cause us to move it up. Potentially it would cause us to move it down. It's doubtful that it would cause us to move it down at this point. But I certainly could not say we should go any lower than 2.5, and I would be in agreement that the ability to move it up right now, based on the limited impact, would be advisable.
Would anybody else like to share their comments on how they're feeling about moving forward with a 2.5% millage increase?
I guess I'll provide some input. I appreciate the comments from Director Fowler and Director Marlowe. I'm extremely concerned about the future as well. Watching the headlines of the last couple of days, I'm very concerned about what local decisions are having on funding. I know that federal funding is not a significant portion of our annual funding, but it appears that now with Lebanon County's decision to unilaterally go yellow under the governor's phases, that there's a good possibility that we could lose federal money through the CARES Act or other funds. And I don't know. I don't have clarity on that. I don't know. I say all that just to say that the uncertainty of the future in the next year, 2 years, is daunting to me. And I see the wisdom of taking a larger increase now to avoid a future problem. My concern is that I don't know that we can do anything to perfectly address it. And I think we're going to be facing a shortfall no matter what. So there may be some wisdom in doing it now, but I'm of the opinion that we settled on a vote for 2.5, and I'm comfortable doing that now. If the majority of the board decides that another higher number is what we should do, and that is the decision of the board to have that vote, I'm certainly willing to listen to the merits of the argument for a higher tax increase, but at this point, I think I'm settled at voting on the 2.5.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I can go on the 2.5, as I said. I don't feel we should go below. Full transparency, we vote on this, and based on additional information we get before the final time, we can make an adjustment to this number to do what's right, on both sides. And I think, no one on their personal budget would want to be making this decision without knowing if they had income, et cetera, and spending. It's a very difficult situation to be in. So I think what we do today is based on our best info today, with the understanding that we may still make that adjustment for that final, or we should have that discussion anyway as a group as to whether or not, based on additional information that comes in, that Leanne provides to us, Mr. Messinger, that we may make that adjustment to get to the right budget.
I'm fine also with keeping it, sorry about that, whoever I cut off. I'm fine with keeping it at a 2.5 vote. There's definitely been great points made both last week and even this evening about the possibility of raising taxes and the pros and cons of that. Or I know last week I was one of the people that talked about, originally I was thinking because of the dire straits people are in with lack of employment and money coming in, that I was originally thinking, 1.5, but the number we had last week between 2 and 3, I had said that I would entertain those, and I was leaning towards more of the 2% range, but definitely great points made by Director Fowler and some other people. But I'm fine with keeping the vote for 2.5 tonight to start off with, but I can respect whatever the board decides that we want to do as far as what to vote on numerically here.
I'll keep it short. I don't think that this is a decision that I feel comfortable making at all. I mean, this is such uncertainty. I don't think anybody's I will be not supporting a 2.5, and I understand that this may be irresponsible. I may regret this. I think the majority of the board is at 2.5, but for my own personal vote, I will be sticking with it too. So.
I guess I'll chime in. First of all, I have a question for Leanne. This shows without the fund balance. Do you have a figure on the 2.5 and the 3.1 of the end fund balance?
I'm going to go back to this. The fund balance that was projected, and we don't have an exact number yet. Well, yeah, I guess we do. But this was the projected for, this was last year at the end of this year. And Leanne, what needs to come out of that yet?
We haven't done the cafeteria transfer yet, and the transportation payments yet that we'll be voting on. So those two, but like we have had some savings in transportation and everything. So we were predicting, I believe, between $800,000 and $900,000. That's what we budgeted deficit. We won't be near that.
Right.
I would say max deficit would be $300,000, and I don't think we would have that.
So Director Gray, we had budgeted money to come out of that general fund. We're not going to take all the money out that we had budgeted to come out, which is good. You shouldn't balance with your fund balance. Now, having said that, let's assume we have that $300,000 for the cafeteria, which will bring it to $4,500. Well, not assume, but you can bank on that. These three items, the track and the cafeteria, will come out of that amount. So, and the budgetary reserve, and just to be clear, that budgetary reserve doesn't come out unless we need it. That goes right back in if we don't, if the budget holds and we get our funding the way we're assuming. We've never dug into that, but it's there as a buffer. But Leanne, you said 900, say it again, 900.
Those three items would total up to 950,000.
So 950,000 less than that. So 4,500,000 approximately. And then we would be taking that out for these one-time expenditures.
Okay. Thank you for that info. And my main reason was just that I've lived through ending fund balances that were a couple 100,000, and that's a very scary place to be. So I just wanted to visually see if we did the 2.5 or the 3.1, where financially would be, especially with the unknowns. I guess where I'm coming down today is that I'm going to stay with the 2.5, but I agree with Director Marlowe and several other board members that have mentioned, I think in June, we should have hopefully a little better idea as far as the state of the country and the state of our state with some numbers. And if it looks shaky, I would be very upfront to say that I would then entertain possibly having to go to the 3.1 to get it closer. But at this point, I think it would be a prudent thing. 2.5 seems to be a compromise between those who, looking for not raising taxes as much to know that and balancing the needs of the students and the taxpayers. So I'm at 2.5 right now, but at the next month, I think we'll have some tough decisions to make, this depending upon what the numbers look like. That's all.
Director Murray and Director Klein, I believe that you are the only two that we haven't heard from yet. Would you like a moment to talk?
Sure, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dave, go ahead.
No, I'd like to stay at 2.5% like we discussed last week. I do understand what everybody's saying about the uncertainty. But I just like Director Gray just mentioned, I think 2.5 is a nice compromise to meet both sides. So I'd like to stay at 2.5%. That's it.
Yeah, and I, just to echo what everybody else said and just kind of put my thoughts on it, I do appreciate all the information that was provided tonight. Looking at the numbers right now, I think that I would, I can see that there's a need for 3.1, so I would certainly be willing to entertain that. I'd also be willing to go back to the 2.5 if that were, if we get more specific numbers and we have an idea of what we're coming into things with for the state. So, I would be willing at this point to entertain both of those. Certainly I'd like to see our budget be balanced, and I don't know that the difference between the 2.5 and the 3.1 is significant enough to me for the taxpayers to be a huge difference for them. Either way, it's a few dollars here, a few dollars there that they're looking at, and so I'd be willing to entertain both of those. Not feeling like it has a huge impact on our taxpayers, but a significant difference for us as a district to look at that number and looking at a more balanced budget for us at the 3.1.
Thank you all for expressing clearly where you're at for this vote. I'll wrap it up and just try to be brief. I think the things that scare me the most is all of the uncertainty. The uncertainty if we will be kind of lucky enough just to be flat funded from the state, which increasingly it sounds as though it might be worse than that. And also the uncertainty of what education next year will look like. How will social distancing affect how we bring students into classrooms and how we bus them to school, and how that will affect our costs? Those things scare me immensely. And so I really feel the need to increase our revenues. Tonight, I would vote for a 3% increase, with the understanding or hope that we might get more clarity on our budget by June. And, God willing, we would hear from the state that things aren't going to be as bad as we anticipate. As Director Nam already mentioned, there has also been, our governor has also expressed that due to actions from our legislators, we may be missing out on some of that CARES subsidy money that was supposed to be earmarked for education, and that's also extremely concerning, which also makes me support a 3% tax increase. As I think about where we are in our local economy, I don't come to that conclusion lightly. I do recognize that people are struggling, that times are very difficult and may continue to be very difficult for an unknown period of time. But as I think about our role as school directors and who we serve most directly and who is most vulnerable in these very difficult situations, I see among the most vulnerable populations being the children and the students that we are indebted to educate. And so that's why I feel very committed to make sure that we can serve them and educate them well and safely next year, no matter what bad hand we're dealt with from the state or from our federal government. So I would support a 3%, but I am glad and thankful that I am one of 9, and I respect the opinions and the input from every one of the other 9 school board directors tonight. And I also am appreciative of the input from our business manager, Mrs. Martin, as well as Dr. Messinger. And if they are telling us that we can make it work at a 2.5, it will be painful, but we can do it. Then I'm comfortable at this point moving forward with a 2.5. I've tried to tally up the comments of everybody tonight, and by my count, it seems as though the majority is most comfortable moving forward with a 2.5, as is listed on the agenda. Does my math seem correct?
Madam President, yeah, I'll just confirm I kept track, and you have a majority support to remain at 2.5, but you also have a majority support that's willing to entertain a higher number in June. So that is just a consideration for the public for the future and for the board's discussion. But for right now, the motion as listed on the agenda, there is majority support for.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you all for your input in that discussion. I think because of that, we can move forward in confidence to item number 2, which I seem to have lost here. Okay, to item number 2, to adopt the proposed final budget, establishing total expenditures and appropriations of the general fund in the amount of $40,255,511. And I will abbreviate that, and pointing out that this is our millage rate for taxes will be 14.1256. This includes a tax increase of 2.5%. May I have a motion to adopt the final proposed budget as presented?
Motion to approve the final budget.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I would just like to say very briefly that I appreciated the comments of the directors and the solicitor. And I do want to emphasize the fact that in June, when we have more data for the public, this could change. It is not our intent now, But I would like to at least put a point on that. I know that Director Marlowe mentioned it, and I appreciate that, and it helped me to solidify that I think this is the right approach. So I just appreciate that clarification, and just for the public to be clear, that remains an option. But in the absence of additional data, I do think this is the right approach. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
So this isn't the vote for the tax increase that's in June? Is that what you mean?
This is the vote for the tax increase for the final proposed budget. In June, it will be the final budget.
The preliminary, yes, including a 2.5 tax increase.
So this is a vote for a 2.5 tax increase.
Correct. And then this will
June, it would be the final vote.
in June, yeah.
Okay.
The importance of this period is that you are posting something out for public notice so that the public has an opportunity to review what you believe you will be passing in June, but it is entirely subject to change. So it's to provide for exactly what the board is asking for. This is what you're thinking now. You're going to seek feedback. You're going to have additional information, and come June, you might make some tweaks, but this is where you think you're headed.
Is there any other discussion before we move to the vote? Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Erdman? Erdman?
No.
Fowler?
Yes.
Marlowe?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Sekelic?
No.
Nom?
Yes.
Bucks?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no, motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, that is to approve the Act 93 agreement, which is effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2022. May I have a motion to approve the Act 93 agreement as presented?
I'll make the motion to approve the Act 93 agreement as presented.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Fowler?
Yes.
Marlowe?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Sekelic?
Yes.
Nom?
Yes.
Bucks?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Erdman?
Yes.
9 yes, motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, approve the compensation plan for classified personnel effective July 1st, 2020. May I have a motion to approve the compensation plan for classified personnel as presented?
Motion to approve?
Second?
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Marlowe?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Klein?
Yes.
Sekelic?
Yes.
Nom?
Yes.
Bucks?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Erdman?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
9 yes, motion carried.
Thank you. Moving to item 5, approve the interim agreement regarding contracted school transportation. May I have a motion to approve the interim agreement as presented?
Motion to approve the interim agreement?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Murray,
Yes.
Klein,
Yes.
Sekelic,
Yes.
Nom,
Yes.
Bucks,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Marlowe.
Yes.
9 yes, motion carried.
Thank you. And our final item for the discussion agenda this evening is to adopt resolution calling for charter school funding reform. May Solicitor say, is it okay if I make a comment about this before I ask for the motion? Okay. Okay. So I just wanted to make a few comments because I know this was not all part of our committee meeting. PSBA recommended this resolution to every school district in the state. This resolution is basically our school district supporting the statements in the resolution. The resolution in no way denounces school choice. It in no way denounces the quality of education that students are getting at charter schools. But what the resolution does state is that the funding formula that is currently used is unfair to public schools. Some schools are paying more money to the same charter school than others, and that the charter schools are receiving more money for special education than they are actually using for special education. Those are just a few of the points that are listed out in this resolution. Currently, over 40% of the other public schools in the state have already signed this resolution. And the purpose of the resolution is that it gives our PSBA advocates a collective voice. So when they are in Harrisburg on the Hill, speaking with our representatives, it gives them, it shows them that they are not alone, that many public schools behind them are supporting the words that they are saying. And so that's the purpose of the resolution this evening. So with that said, may I have a motion to approve charter school funding reform resolution as presented?
So moved.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I would just like to say very briefly that we often get opportunities to sign resolutions from PSBA. And as a general rule, I personally am usually not in favor of chiming in on political issues that I think could be a hot button issue. This one, however, I think I'm in favor of. Every item that we've had on the discussion agenda tonight has dealt with very difficult decisions and very difficult economic and very difficult conversations that have had to do with preparing for the future, especially given the pandemic. So with those things in mind, I am personally willing to make an exception in this regard because I think this is an important statement for us to make. It does affect our funding. So I'm in support of the resolution.
Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Martin, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Klein,
Yes.
Sekelic,
Yes.
Nom,
Yes.
Bucks,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Marlowe,
Yes.
Murray.
Yes.
9 yes, a motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item L, we have reports from our representatives. The first is Career and Technology Center. Director Klein, do you have a report for this evening?
Yeah, I have one thing I want to bring up. The CTC initially was asking for a 2.1% from all the districts. But they're going back to their budget to try to get it to 0%. We're going to talk about that next week. So initially we were going to do 2.1% raise to all the districts, and they're seeing what they can do to get it down to a 0%. And they're facing many challenges we are right now, and I think they're doing a pretty good job over there. That's it.
Thank you for that update. Next is the intermediate unit, Director Murray.
Through a chain of events, the IU meeting was canceled for the month of April, and so I'm looking forward to bringing back a report for the May meeting that I'll be attending. Thank you.
You mean the June meeting, right?
Well, we haven't had our May meeting yet.
That you'll tell us at the June meeting. Sorry.
Yes, sorry. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. Yeah.
No, that was my misunderstanding. All right, moving to our legislative PSBA report. Director Sakellek.
I think that you pretty much gave the PSBA one, which was the charter reform that we just signed. And I think Director Nam gave the legislative, which is that's all bad and ugly too. So Director Nam, is there anything you want to add to this specifically at the legislative side? You seem to be a little bit more up to date. I'm kind of catching up over the past couple of days.
No, yesterday was the PSBA Advocacy Day. It was an electronic advocacy day. I was not able to participate, unfortunately, due to work requirements, but that did take place yesterday. In the interim, I have had conversations, or a conversation with our legislative representative, and I would encourage everyone to take advantage to do that. I left a voicemail, he did call back. We had a good conversation. These are ways that we can get our voices known, and I would encourage everyone to do that if you feel the need to. Feel free to reach out to Director Sakellek or me first if you'd like to, and we can help direct you in the best way to go in that regard. But there have been a lot of legislative developments. I have been following them very closely. I would just put a finer point on some of our earlier discussion. I think a lot of what happens between now and June and beyond is still up in the air, particularly with respect to the Hill in Harrisburg, and even with respect to what happens in response to Lebanon County's independent decision to move yellow. I think all of that is still very fluid, and I'm going to be paying attention to it as well. And I know Director Sakellek will too, so we'll try to keep you updated as we can.
I'll chime in. I was able to attend the keynote for Advocacy Day for PSBA yesterday. Senate was in session, and I had a busy schedule as well, so I wasn't able to meet via Zoom with any of our representatives, but PSBA did leave us with some good information for talking points and encouraged us to try to schedule those meetings with our representatives. So I want to get through finals week, and then I'll try to reach out to some of them, and hopefully some of you can join me in speaking to those talking points. And we've already pretty much covered most of them tonight. The number one talking point and concern for most school districts right now is, of course, the state budget, and trying to ensure that they don't, they would at least just level fund us for the coming year. The second was charter school funding reform. And the third was some type of long-standing mandate relief, that many of the costs to every school district is largely out of our control. And so that includes, excuse me, some special ed funding, as well as retirement contributions that school districts are required to pay into that. Those are mandated. We don't have control over them, but we do indeed have to pay them, and they take up a large portion of our budget. So those were the main talking points suggested by PSBA, if and when we do meet with our representatives. All right, so item M is new business. Is there any other new business for discussion this evening?
Dr. Bucks, I know you're going to mention this, but I do want to take note of the meetings for June. June 2nd will be a voting meeting. And we will attempt to have everything on there for June. If we can't, if we don't, then we will hold the meeting on June 9th as well, but it will be a voting meeting on June 2nd.
Thank you. Is there any other new business or announcements for this evening? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? This is a unanimous roll call vote. Your vote will be recorded in the affirmative unless you say nay or I abstain. The motion has passed. This meeting is adjourned. Stay safe and stay well, and I'll see you in June. Thanks, everybody.